Imagine, if your heart can bear it, a subtle force that seeps in you, slowly, persistently, until your thoughts are not your own, until your ambitions are hijacked by it, until your soul, yes, your very soul, becomes a marionette to this unseen puppeteer, pulling you through strings of pain and pleasure. And what is this force? It prides itself as delight, but in truth, it degenerates you. It has the charm of a siren, but the bite of a shark. Empires have fallen beneath its breath. Brilliant men have disintegrated under its gaze. It has left countless lives in quiet ruin. It doesn't start with evil. It starts with curiosity. But gradually it sabotages your desires, your attention, your very perception of reality. But what if this force could be subdued? What if defeating it was not only plausible, but the most liberating, the most divine rebellion a man could perform in this absurd, trembling world? Let your mind conceive this idea. Lust is the test to awaken your inner warrior. This isn't about repressing lust. This is about reclaiming your will, freeing yourself from the enchantments of lust. Because lust, like a spider, weaves illusions into your thoughts, your feelings, your very fabric of existence. Lust isn't just about sexuality. It is the primal hunger, an instinct to stimulate, to possess, to escape. It gorges on your attention and starves your soul of meaning. In this video, we're going to unmask the truth that has troubled humanity since its birth, across centuries, across the dusty pages of the past. Prophets, sages, and philosophers alike have howled the same refrain. When desire rules, reason kneels. When the appetite commands, the self becomes a slave. But listen closely, for I offer no consolation, only a mirror. By the time we conclude, you may not be happy, but you will be awake. And awakening, dear listener, is not sweet, it is dreadful. It is facing the shadow, but it is also the first step toward true freedom. Consider the moments lust wore the mask of love, the way it promised warmth and delivered only a colder loneliness. How many times has it whispered that joy was just one click, one touch, one indulgence away? And how many times did that promise collapse into a deeper void, darker than before? Freud, the man who poked his fingers into the psyche's depths, claimed that man is governed by unconscious urges. Chief among them is libido. He believed repression leads to neurosis. But his student, Carl Jung, went further. He peered deeper and understood that by facing and incorporating these primal desires, we can evolve not just psychologically, but also organically. This is the essence of inner warrior, not denial, but transformation, not rejection, but evolution. He called this ordeal individuation, a beautiful, brutal word. It means to become what you are, not by comfort, but by war. It means dragging your shadows into the light and bleeding meaning from the wound. And lust, my friend, is among the blackest of those shadows. When ignored and unconscious, it controls us. When faced willingly, it can be transformed, transmuted into something radiant: creativity, power, immanence, and transcendence. Have you ever asked why the ancients spoke of celibacy, sexual restraint, and renunciation? They were not the rules to reject human nature. They were the rules to make your body the alchemist's furnace, in which your base desires are transformed into supreme power. In Hinduism, it is brahmacharya, the sacred channeling of energy from sexual organs to the brain. In Christianity, the saints declared lust a veil before the soul's eye. And in Buddhism, desire itself is the root of all suffering. The lesson is the same: to preserve one's viral energy, not wasting it through compulsive indulgence. Again and again, different languages, different cultures, the same message. You must pass through the fire of lust to taste true freedom. You must sit with it. Observe its root in your body and mind. Where does it come from? Where does it lead to? For what pain or emptiness it is trying to act as a balm? Is it really about sensuality? Or is it an escape from something deeper? Fear, despair, loneliness. Because if we meditate deeper, we see that mostly lust doesn't come from abundance, but from lack. Not from love, but from longing. And here, perhaps, the modern world fails most. Look around you. The flickering screens, the artificial intimacy, the cheap neon desire. It's not freedom, it's a prison of dopamine. The algorithms don't care about your soul. They feed the beast, not the man. They want your eyes wide and your mind asleep. Let's be clear, lust is not a moral issue, it's a psychological weapon. The real crime isn't desire, it's what has been done to desire. Modern systems profit from your hunger. Your biology is now a business model. Your instincts turned into profit. What once pointed toward union, love, and vitality has been rewired, redirected into products, performers, and consumptions. We are no longer lovers, we are users. And the addiction is not just to sex, but to illusions. So I ask you, what has lust cost you? What were the consequences of decisions made under its spell? What relationships were poisoned by its thirst? What would your life feel like if you were no longer ruled by it? How much of your energy has been wasted chasing its illusions? They are not simple questions. They are the doorway to freedom. The consequences of lust aren't just external, but internal as well. It begins with the fragmentation of yourself. First, you lose trust in your own will. You promise yourself you'll stop. You don't. You try to fight it. You collapse. Each time, a part of you weakens. Craving, satisfaction, emptiness, shame. Repeat. You feel alive for a moment, then foggy, hollow, numb. Over time, your energy diminishes. Your attention scatters. Your resilience fades. Lust doesn't just drain your body, it starves your soul. Is this what freedom looks like? Modern culture glorifies pleasure, but is it pleasure that liberates or that enslaves? Plato spoke of eros as divine madness, the soul's longing for the eternal. Vedantic sages spoke of kama not as indulgence, but as a force to be sublimated, aimed toward higher realization. But what do? We celebrate indulgence without depth. We confuse stimulation for connection. We call slavery freedom. We chase without asking, who is doing the chasing? Have the courage to answer. Because until you do, you remain a puppet, dancing on a thread you cannot see. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who governed both a kingdom and himself, said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Meditate on this, and you will find the way. The Stoics knew, freedom doesn't come by chasing every impulse. It comes by watching them dissolve in the cold light of awareness. So what is lust? Lust is not just about physiological instinct. It is a psychological construct. How you relate the concept of pleasure, the promise of escape, the illusion of completeness through external validations. It is the lie that fulfillment waits outside you, always just out of reach. But the tide can turn. You can reclaim your power. When you realize that nothing external will ever complete you, not her body, not his gaze, not that brief flicker of pleasure, your inner warrior can wake. When you understand that lust is divine love in its raw form, and to wake, dear soul, is to begin dying to the world and being born to yourself. You are not here to chase phantoms. You are here to become flame. Let this ache for a moment. This ache you feel is a signal, not of shame, but of awakening. Lust is not just a temptation, it's a threshold. It is not a sin to be crushed, but a fire to be transcended. This is your test, to not repress desire, but to refine it, to not destroy energy, but to aim it higher. This is not just about purity, it's about the power of being oneself. The warrior doesn't kill his desire, he reclaims it and becomes unstoppable. You think the battle is out there, in the streets, in the economy, in the politics of fools. Number the true war, the only war worth a damn, is waged in silence, in the shadows, within. When temptation calls your name, when you reach for the phone, the fantasy, the fall. The battlefield is internal, yes, but that makes it no less real, no less bloody. You'll know this the first time you try to say no to the craving and feel it tear at you like a beast. The first time you stare down lust and it laughs in your face. The first time you try to be still and the stillness screams louder than any war. And you know it. Every morning you rise with a lie gnawing at your throat. A quiet voice that says, you are not who you pretend to be. And you hurry to bury it under routines, under coffee, under noise. You scroll, you eat, you smile. But the voice returns, late at night, when the world is asleep and you are naked before yourself. It whispers, coward. Don't be offended. Be honest. This isn't slander. It's a diagnosis. You know something in you was meant to fight, and instead, you made a truce with mediocrity. You surrendered your sword without a struggle. Not to an enemy, but to convenience. Why? Why do men, strong, capable men, fall like paper before their own desires? Why do they trade dignity for distraction, purpose for pleasure? Because they forget that the enemy is not outside. The real enemy is in the mirror. Yes, he, that shadow. You, who avoids discomfort, who fears the void, who reaches for the screen instead of the silence. He is the one robbing you. Do you imagine the warrior as someone with broad shoulders and a sword? The true warrior is the one who wakes up and says, no. No to indulgence, no to excuses, no to the soft poison of comfort. He says yes only to suffering, to discipline, to solitude, to fire. Think about this. You were not born to chase shadows. You were born to become light. And if you still think this is merely about physical desire, think again. Lust is a mirror, reflecting how we relate to all things, to power, status, approval, novelty. It is the constant craving for more, the dissatisfaction with now, the hunger that never ends. To transform lust, then, is to reclaim the present moment. It is to silence the craving and listen to the soul. What would your life look like if you were no longer seduced by every passing desire? How much energy would you free up? What clarity would you gain? What kind of person would you become? This is the invitation not to suppress, but to transcend, not to escape desire, but to alchemize it. Too long you have looked outside for help, but no one is coming to help you. No priest, no philosopher, no lover. Only you. Only this ragged, half-broken, trembling self you carry in silence like a corpse on your back. He is all you have. He is your battlefield and your redemption. This is the inner war every man must fight on his own, whether or not he ever names it. Do I serve my urges, or do I master them? You were never taught that desire could be holy. You were only shown two choices: indulge or suppress, drown in it or deny it. The sages, warriors, artists, monks, and mystics, so many of them faced this fire. They didn't run. They forged themselves inside it. They became focused, sharp, unshakable, alive. What will you do? The ancients knew something we've forgotten, that desire is sacred fire. And like fire, it can either burn your house down or light the path to heaven. Desire, in its core, is not evil. It is energy, life force, the spark behind creation itself. Plato, in his Symposium, said that love is noblest of all desires, and it is intrinsically linked to the soul's journey towards enlightenment. It's through love that individuals can come to understand their own nature and the nature of the world around them. And in Tantra, energy born from lust is transformed, not repressed, not feared, but directed upward. It becomes tapas, spiritual heat. Ancient wisdom didn't shame desire, it gave it a purpose. The ancient art was not about repression, it was about transmutation. Sublimation, as the psychologists say, is when you take instinctual energy and reforge it into something creative, noble, lasting. When the same energy that once led you to escape becomes the power that helps you build. Lust becomes toxic when it's only about sexuality, when it's used to fill the void, not to light the fire of vision. But lust, when aimed at something higher than sensual gratification, becomes a holy ambition. Let the lust move through you. Hold the little addictive man inside. Let the little man inside you scream. Let him beg for comfort. Then let him burn in the fire of lust. And finally, let him arise again as your true self. When you rise above lust, you don't just regain control. You return home. You trust yourself again. You walk into rooms differently, not because you've killed something inside you, but because you've redeemed it. You stop leaking energy through fantasy. You hold it, contain it. And in that containment, a deeper power is born. Stillness, presence, purpose. A power so terrifyingly real that even your demons run away. Look around you, not with the eyes of a child, but with the exhausted gaze of one who has seen too much. Observe this world not as a stage of progress, but as a theater of illusion. Lust, once a private whisper in the dark corners of a man's soul, has now become the public anthem of an entire civilization. It's no longer hidden. It's celebrated, monetized, broadcast through every flickering screen like incense to a modern god. And what a strange god it is, one that promises ecstasy but delivers despair. One that claims intimacy but breeds loneliness. They've industrialized your hunger, and you, poor soul, you think you are free. You are not free. You are targeted, conditioned, seduced by 1,000 blinking lights, each one whispering, "Come, just a little more, one more taste, one more scroll." It is not simply that you desire, it is that your desire has been weaponized against you. The market has colonized your appetites. It thrives on your restlessness, your inability to sit quietly with yourself. Peace? There's no profit in peace, but insatiability. Now that sells. You're told this is liberation, that freedom means indulging every whim. You chase pleasure thinking it will heal the gnawing wound inside you, but lust feeds the wound while pretending to soothe it. Every image, every advertisement, every temptation, none of it is accidental. They want you fragmented, starving, desperate for a fix that never satisfies. The machinery of modern life is not built for your flourishing. It is built for your consumption. And in this strange, inverted world, discipline is seen as repression. But I ask you, what is more repressive, governing your appetite or being ruled by it? What is more enslaving, denying yourself the fleeting thrill or being shackled to a cycle that empties you day by day? Discipline is not the death of desire, it is its sanctification. It is the rebellion of the soul against the tyranny of impulse. To live with discipline is to remember that you are not just a bundle of nerves and cravings. You are a being capable of vision, capable of sacrifice, capable of alignment with something higher. The world will always try to lure you with what glitters. But once you know what is real, you can never be fooled again. Nietzsche, who danced with madness and sanity alike, once said, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." Reflect on this. If you cannot govern the storm within, then you will be governed by algorithms, by trends, by faceless puppeteers who feed on your passivity. But when you begin to obey something deeper, your conscience, your highest aim, you become, at last, ungovernable by the shallow. This doesn't mean you will not fall again. You will fall, not once, not twice, many times. No matter how strong your resolve, lust waits. Quietly, at the edges of your fatigue, your loneliness, your uncertainty. In moments of stillness, it whispers, and if you're not awake, it takes you. The path of mastery was never promised to be linear. In every tradition, the journey to wholeness begins with descent. Like the myth of Inanna, descending into the underworld, like the biblical exile into the wilderness, like Arjuna, collapsing in despair on the battlefield before rising in the Bhagavad Gita. Falling is not failure. It is a necessary initiation. You say, "I'll stop tomorrow." You give in. Again, then silence, shame, a crushing sense of betrayal. You didn't just break a promise, you broke yourself. Modern neuroscience helps us see why lust can feel like a trap you can't escape. Every time you give in to lust, through pornography, fantasy, or compulsive sexual behavior, it triggers a flood of dopamine, the brain's key chemical for reward and motivation. Temporarily, this creates a high, a spike of pleasure and excitement. But in the long run, dopamine depletes. Modern society, with its endless stimulation and access to pleasure, creates a paradox. The more pleasure we chase, the more pain we feel. Because the brain is built for balance. So, over time, as you keep overstimulating the reward system, the brain starts reducing its sensitivity to pleasure. The same content or stimulation gives you less satisfaction. So, to feel the same thrill, you seek more intense stimuli, more novelty, more extremes. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex begins to lose its regulatory power. This part of the brain is like your inner executive. It helps you weigh consequences, make wise decisions, and control impulses. In a 2011 study published in Brain Research, researchers observed reduced activity and structural changes in the prefrontal regions of those with compulsive sexual behavior, resembling the neural patterns of substance addicts. This explains why, after indulgence, many experience a crash, not just emotionally, but neurologically. The brain is momentarily depleted of dopamine and other feel-good neurotransmitters. You feel numb, foggy, tired, ashamed. This is where lust becomes dangerous, not because desire itself is bad, but because unchecked desire slowly replaces your ability to be present, to be whole, to be free. Now think about this in your own life. How often have you reached for something, a screen, a fantasy, a person, not out of joy but out of discomfort? How often has lust become an escape, hatched from boredom, from anxiety, from your own silence? This is not freedom. This is dependency dressed up as desire. And then your inner judge awakens, saying, "You're weak. You'll never change. What's the point of trying again?" This voice is not strength. It's an internalized shame, and it's more dangerous than lust itself, because shame doesn't inspire change, it locks you in. In The Psychology of Shame, Gershon Kaufman describes it as the most disturbing effect, a sickness of the soul. Shame separates you from yourself, creating a split, the one who acts and the one who watches in horror. And so the cycle continues, craving, indulgence, emptiness, guilt, self-hatred, and back again. But ancient wisdom never condemned falling. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu writes, "Failure is the foundation of success and the means by which it is achieved." Modern trauma research, like the work of Dr. Gabor Mate, shows that addiction is not about pleasure, but pain. That lust, like any compulsive pattern, is a way to soothe what remains unresolved in the nervous system. So what do you do after the fall? In Jungian psychology, The fall into shadow, the confrontation with our darkest impulses, is not regression, but integration. Jung called it enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite. Descent, properly faced, leads to wholeness. The warrior understands this. He doesn't recoil in guilt. He reflects by pausing in the moment, in the space between stimulus and response. He doesn't ask, "Why am I so weak?" He asks, "What was I really craving? What feeling am I trying to escape? Is this desire authentic, or is it a symptom of something deeper?" These questions are not meant to stop desire. They are meant to be conscious of it. Because desire in its purest form is sacred. It drives growth, love, connection, creation. But when hijacked by lust, it becomes distorted. It narrows your vision, it robs you of your center, and it makes you forget your mission. The ancient Greeks had a word for this distortion, akrasier. It means acting against your better judgment through weakness of will. Socrates puzzled over it. Aristotle tried to explain it. But all agreed the true measure of a human being is found in how they govern themselves when faced with temptation. This is the warrior's way, not to reject the fall, but to learn from it. Each relapse becomes fuel. Each wound becomes a doorway. Each shame becomes a fire that purifies, if you are willing to walk through it consciously. Because the one who rises after falling rises not just with willpower, but with wisdom. Real freedom is not found in never falling. It's found in rising again, deeper, wiser, and more whole. That is the beginning of sovereignty. And that, my friend, is what the world fears most. A man, a woman, no longer seduced by the circus, but awake, silent, and inwardly free. And now we come to the turning point, not the easy kind found in self-help manuals or sermons from men who've never tasted the abyss, but the kind one only arrives at after kneeling before the altar of one's own degradation. Lust, yes, we've condemned it, exposed its hollow gifts. But what if we were wrong to treat it as an enemy? What if this very hunger, this unbearable fire inside you, was not the curse, but the test, not of your morality, but of your mastery? There are those who run from it, who repress, deny, crucify their own flesh in an effort to feel pure. Fools. And then there are those who surrender to it entirely, worshiping their desire like a god, letting it consume them. Slaves. They think it's about pleasure, about images, bodies, or moments of release. But beneath that surface lies something far deeper. A mirror held up to your own unconscious mind. A doorway, a battlefield. A middle way, the razor's edge path walked by mystics, monks, and madmen alike. A path not of repression, not indulgence, but transmutation. Take this lust, this electric fire surging in your veins, and do not waste it on screens and shadows. Hold it, contain it, suffer it, let it build until it carves through you like a sacred knife. You think this is a metaphor? Romantic poetry. Number this is blood and breath and bone. Ancient spiritual systems never viewed lust merely as a sin. They saw it as raw psychic energy, what the yogis called kama, what the Greeks called eros. It could either bind the soul to illusion or burn away the false self and reforge a higher identity. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls lust one of the 3 gates to hell, not to shame you, but to remind you. It is desire ungoverned that turns man into a slave. The Stoics too warned against becoming a puppet of passion. Seneca wrote, "He who is a slave to lust is not free, even in solitude." Dr. Anna Lemke, Stanford, explains, "Every time we seek intense pleasure, we tip the scale toward pain. The brain responds by downregulating dopamine receptors. We feel less joy, even in real life. The result? A man who once enjoyed art, nature, conversation, or touch, now finds everything dull. He's trapped in a cycle where only the fantasy stimulates him, and everything else feels gray. It's neural conditioning, and the good news is, it can be rewired. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate." Lust, when left unconscious, becomes a silent puppeteer. You think you're making choices, but you're reacting to impulses. You believe you're in control, but your cravings have the wheel. To overcome at last is to take the wheel back. The alchemical test of lust is this: can you make the unconscious craving conscious and transform it? This is the path of non-attachment. To watch the craving rise without obeying it. To choose stillness, not slavery. Neuroscience supports this. With time, abstaining from compulsive stimuli leads to dopamine rebalancing. Natural joys return. The brain heals. The heart opens. When you choose, truly choose, to stop fleeing yourself, when you gather what you've squandered, something terrifying begins to happen. You change. You become concentrated. You begin to burn with an inner heat not fed by desire, but by intention and purpose. And that is the alchemy. Think of Tesla, Da Vinci, men who turned solitude into power, not because they lacked hunger, but because they refused to be owned by it. You ask, who would I be without this craving? I ask, who might you become? What would happen if you took all the energy you pour into lust and redirected it toward mastery? How much could you learn, create, heal, grow if your mind was no longer divided? Imagine the focus, imagine the clarity, imagine the inner peace. But perhaps the most important question is, who would you become if you were no longer driven by hunger, not just sexually, but emotionally, spiritually, existentially? Who are you without the craving? This is the deeper layer of the journey. This is a test of whether you will serve your lower impulses or awaken your higher being. Will you obey the craving or outgrow it? You have flirted with your demons long enough. Now is the hour to make them kneel. Studies in behavioral psychology show that willpower alone is a limited resource. Dr. Roy Baumeister's ego depletion theory found that self-control fatigues under stress, temptation, and decision overload. So if you're trying to fight lust in a vacuum, with no structure, no vision, no community, you will fall back into the loop. What works? Replacing triggers, rewiring patterns, rebuilding identity. Not by force, but by wisdom. Not by denial, but by acceptance. Now turn inward. Consider what your life might become if you no longer woke in the fog of regret, no longer shackled to cravings that blur your purpose. What would your days look like if your mind was no longer fragmented, if your attention, once scattered, became sovereign? What would you create if your energy, once siphoned by compulsion, returned to your core like a tide rediscovering its shore? What kind of love would you attract, not out of emptiness, but out of spiritual surplus? What if I told you that lust, when properly understood and transmuted, could become the fuel for the very greatness you seek? Not something to be feared or shunned, but something to be faced, mastered, and channeled. Like fire, destructive in its wild form, but when contained, it lights the world. This is the transmutation, when lust, once wild and shadowy, ripens into love. Not the sentimental love of romance, but the love of reality, the love of clarity, the love of truth, of beauty, of purposeful presence. This is not a myth. It is a process you can feel in your body, witness in your thoughts, and live in your decisions. Carl Jung understood this well. He saw libido not as mere sexual impulse, but as the raw psychic fuel of the self. And he warned, when this energy is denied its evolution, it does not vanish, it curdles. It becomes neurosis. But if integrated, owned, examined, and elevated, it becomes the engine of inner transformation. This is what the soul's individuation demands: to take each compulsive fragment, each disowned desire, and reweave it into a conscious whole. Lust, left in the dark, breeds shame and secrecy. But brought into light, it becomes rocket fuel for awakening. Make no mistake, this is not a path for the faint of heart. It asks everything of you: your vigilance, your honesty, your sacred patience. But in return, it offers you everything. Because the moment you stop living on impulse and begin living with intention, the structure of your life begins to realign. You cease to orbit around pleasure and instead become a gravitational force of meaning. And yet, this is only the beginning. Let us speak now of a deeper metamorphosis: to love in the absence of lust, to touch another not with hunger or projection, but with holy presence. For too long, we've confused lust for intimacy. But they are not the same. Lust reaches out to possess. Intimacy waits to understand. Lust consumes the image of the other. Intimacy embraces the soul of the other. When you overcome lust, you do not cease to desire. You learn how to desire rightly. You stop seeing others as screens for your projection and start seeing them as mirrors of your own becoming. Not as objects, but as companions. Not as fantasies, but as sacred beings. And when this shift occurs, when desire is refined through awareness, you are no longer ruled by hunger. You are moved by purpose. This is what the mystics called agape, a love that transcends the physical and touches the eternal. Saint Augustine, who once struggled with the lust in wilderness, wrote, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." He wasn't speaking only of theology. He was naming the ache beneath all longing, the restlessness that hides beneath lust. That restlessness is the same one that drives people toward lust. It is not wrong, it is a signal. A longing for the infinite, dressed in the garments of the temporary. It is the soul's cry to come home. Conquering lust is not about becoming less human. It is about becoming fully human. It is about rising from compulsion into clarity, from craving into communion, from reaction into revelation. Now we will speak of desire as a spiritual path of the hidden teachings, of sacred sexuality, of the final key that liberates the soul from bondage and opens the gate to true inner freedom. Because the one who prevails over lust doesn't just overcome temptations, he uncoils illusion, he vanquishes distraction, he conquers the very machinery that binds humanity to suffering. He or she conquers the world. Are you ready to receive the final revelation? The one who sees lust as a test to awaken his inner warrior conquers the world. But what does that truly mean, to conquer the world? It is not to reject it. It is to no longer be ruled by it. It is to walk through its illusions without being deceived. It is to hold desire without being possessed by it. It is to see clearly where others are blinded by appetite. Here lies the most powerful psychological revelation. Lust, in its most seductive form, is not about sex. It is about escape. It is the refusal to be present with what is. And that, more than anything, is what chains us to suffering. Because everything you chase, every image, every fantasy, every quick fix is not actually about the thing itself. It is about your attempt to bypass the pain of being here now with yourself. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it." But lust devours that attentiveness. It pulls you out of now and traps you into not yet. Always reaching, never arriving, always tasting, never satisfying. So the war is not with lust, but with being unconscious of it. This war is not the denial of life, it is the sanctification of it. Neuroplasticity is your ally in this war. Each time you resist the urge, not with shame but with awareness, you send a new signal to your brain. You begin to down-regulate the overactive reward response and up-regulate the prefrontal cortex, the seat of self-governance. The prefrontal cortex, when reactivated, begins to reassign value. You start to find beauty in ordinary things again: sunlight through leaves, meaningful conversation, stillness. Across spiritual traditions, from Zen monks to Christian mystics, the message is the same. Freedom lies not in indulgence, nor in avoidance, but in awareness. And awareness transforms everything. When you become aware of your desire, you can investigate it. You can ask, what am I truly hungry for? What wound is this urge trying to soothe? What truth am I avoiding? And in that honest inquiry, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see that your desires are not your enemy. They are your teachers. They show you where you are divided. They show you what you fear. They show you what you have yet to love in yourself. And that is the key. In Vedanta, the Atman, the true self, is ever pure, ever luminous. Yet this light becomes obscured by kama, desire, clouding the mind like smoke over fire. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, "Desire is the veil. It burns like fire and blinds like smoke. Know it as the enemy of wisdom." Similarly, in Stoicism, Epictetus warns, "No man is free who is not master of himself." All traditions agree. When one tries to restrain lust, a war begins inside. The body rebels with tension, craving release. The mind retaliates with fantasies, arguments, temptations. The ego panics, sensing the death of its familiar identity as a pleasure seeker. This is the crossroads of initiation. To indulge is easy, but to hold the tension without collapsing into it, that is where soul is forged. The Christian mystics called this the dark night of the soul. Buddhists named it the second dart, the suffering that arises not from the desire itself, but from our resistance and identification with it. Religions have always seen lust as a test of inner stature. In Islam, the struggle against lust, nafs, is the greater jihad, not against others, but against the unconscious self. In Christianity, lust is the temptation that turns the soul outward. But resisting it, said Augustine, makes the heart a temple for divine grace. In Taoism, unregulated desire drains the jing, the essence of life. But transmuted, it fuels spiritual awakening. These teachings reveal a pattern. Lust is a mirror, not of sin, but of unrealized power. It shows us where we still seek wholeness. Outside, instead of cultivating it within. When desire is not discharged, it doesn't die. It rises, from the loins to the heart, from instinct to meaning, from lust to love, from self-gratification to sacred transcendence. The mystics taught that when eros is aligned with logos, desire becomes a fuel for transcendence. Whoever transforms lust, says the Gita, becomes steady as a flame in a windless place. The one who stops identifying himself with his desires, says the Dhammapada, cuts the roots of suffering. This is the mark of the inner warrior, not one who kills desire, but one who converts it into dignity, clarity, and a radiant force of will. A man without discipline is tossed by every temptation, but a man with vision, he shapes his life like an artist shapes stone. He doesn't ask, "What do I feel like doing?" He asks, "What is worthy of me?" And in that moment, lust loses its grip because something higher has awakened. The inner warrior is no longer a dream. He's alive, watching, forging himself in every choice. This is the beginning of liberation. And now, we prepare for the climax, lust transformed into love. Here comes the recognition that beneath all your lust, beneath the sweat, the shame, the hunger, There was something sacred calling you all along, something waiting for you in the very craving you tried to silence. Desire was never your enemy, but your teacher, and its lesson is love. Not the love sold in screen-lit fantasies, not the trembling dependency masked as passion, not the flattery of possession or the plea of choose me. This love is stranger in the modern world. It arrives when you are empty. It lives where the world turned away. The Greeks called it agape, not possession, not obsession, but the still presence that sees without needing to hold. It doesn't want to take, it wants to be. This love is not a conquest. You cannot seduce it. You must die into it. And when you finally turn that gaze inward, toward your aching, addicted, unfinished self, and still do not flinch, that's when the healing begins. Kierkegaard called it absolute inwardness. The moment when all outer justifications collapse, when you stop performing, stop bargaining, and stand alone before God, naked, trembling, aware. That trembling is the birthplace of love. Even the Gita understood this. When a man renounces all desires and acts without craving, he finds peace. Not the peace of numbness, but of presence. You begin to realize that the thrill was never about the thing you wanted. You wanted to feel alive. You wanted to feel whole. You wanted to feel love. And now you no longer seek it in images or illusions. You find it in the stillness of your own being. You find it in the silence between breaths. You find it in the way your heart softens when you stop running. This is the ultimate transformation, because the world, poor in all its distractions, seductions, and false promises, no longer has power over you. You're no longer chasing ghosts. You are no longer craving things that break you. You are no longer trying to escape yourself. You are here. And that presence, quiet, unwavering, grounded, is what all spiritual masters point to when they speak of enlightenment. It is not some distant state. It is the return to your original self, untouched, uncorrupted, whole. This is what the mystic poet Rumi meant when he wrote, "Try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you." Lust resists life. It grasps, clings, demands. But love allows, love receives, love remains. And when you live from that space, from truth, from clarity, from purpose, you begin to embody a different frequency, a frequency that elevates those around you, that radiates calm, that walks into chaos and brings peace. This is what the world needs now more than ever. Not more people chasing pleasure, but more people rooted in presence. Not more opinions, but more clarity. Not more noise, but more stillness. This is what the Sufis called ishq-e-hakiki, divine love. Not as comfort, but as fire. A fire that does not destroy you, but burns away the false. Nietzsche, with all his thunder, saw glimpses of this too. What is done out of love always takes place beyond good and evil, beyond fear, beyond approval, beyond the tidy categories of the moral marketplace. This love does not want you good. It wants you real, radically, divinely, uncomfortably real. And when you are finally real, when you've stopped running, stopped numbing, stopped lying, lust loses its throne. Not because you strangled it, but because you finally saw what it was. A mask, a messenger, a shadow pointing to the light. Because lust is not the opposite of love. It is its echo, a distortion, a confused cry for wholeness. And when you answer that cry, not with more craving, but with compassion, the echo returns home. And so do you. The Bhagavad Gita speaks again, here, almost like a whisper. He who sees all beings in the self, and the self in all beings, he never turns away. This is the reversal. Desire once turned you outward, made you chase shadows on the wall. It felt like an enemy. Now it has become a mirror. You see, it was never about them. It was about you, and it was always about returning, not to who you were before the addiction or before the fall, but to something far older, to the part of you that was never lost, only buried. The Sufis called it the beloved within. Rumi wrote, "You were born with wings to reach, beloved. Why prefer to crawl through life?" But he also warned, those wings are both pain and pleasure. All the stages, exposure, inner chaos, rewiring your brain, channeling energy. They weren't detours, they were rites of passage. And Jung reminds us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That's what you did. You made the darkness conscious. And now, it no longer rules you. And the truth is, you were not meant to be a slave to impulse. You were meant to transmute it, to take the wild, unruly forces of desire and turn them into devotion, to take the ache and turn it into attention, to take the longing and let it lead you home. When a warrior endures the trial of lust, not by rejecting it, not by feeding it, but by holding it in presence, it begins to change, it softens, it stops screaming, it begins to reveal what it always was beneath the noise, a longing, not for pleasure, not for possession, but for wholeness. That's the secret. Lust was never just about the body, it was about the ache to return to something deeper, to a union that can't be touched by hands. The weak chase it in others. The warrior burns for it within. And when that fire is held long enough without collapsing, when it's not obeyed blindly nor shut down in shame, it transmutes, it becomes love. This love is a blade, forged in silence, tempered in longing, and wielded with compassion. So I'll say it plainly. Lust is a test, but love is the reward. The warrior who passes the test discovers that love is not weakness, it's the highest form of strength. Because love doesn't need to control, it doesn't panic, it doesn't chase, it stands. Love, in the end, is not the antidote to lust, it is its fulfillment. Lust says, I must have you. Love says, I see myself through you. Lust says, I want to escape. Love says, I will remain. Where lust demanded, love offers. Where lust consumed, love creates. Where lust burned without purpose, love illuminates the whole existence. And what remains in you, after all this burning, after you've stood alone before the mirror and did not look away, that is your soul. Not as an idea, but as a force, a presence. You begin to feel it in the smallest things, the way you touch water, the way you hold silence, the way you no longer flinch when emptiness comes. You've become someone who can bear the silence, who no longer fears the abyss, because you know now, the abyss is not a void, it is a womb. This is the warrior you've become, not someone who killed the beast, but someone who looked the beast in the eye and saw himself. The inner warrior was never about aggression, it was about stillness, the power to sit with your hunger without needing to feed it, the strength to feel the fire without becoming the flame. This is sovereignty, not the sovereignty that dominates others, but the sovereignty that cannot be dominated from within. When lust tried to control you, you didn't suppress it. You watched it, you walked with it, you listened, and then you saw through it. And in that seeing, something else awakened, something ancient, something quiet, something eternal. Call it love, call it the beloved, call it God. But know this, it was never separate from you. And now, neither are you. That's what real mastery is. Not absence of desire, but clarity of relationship with desire. Old triggers no longer hypnotize you. Why? Because you've built something permanent inside. The capacity to respond, not react. The dignity to say no, not out of fear, but out of love. The clarity to lead your life, not be led by your craving. This is the throne, not made of gold, but of presence. Lust was never here to destroy you. It was here to initiate you, a sacred fire, a divine mirror, a test only the willing can pass. So understand now, lust was the doorway, but peace was always the destination. This was never about shame. It was about transformation. So ask yourself now from the deepest part of your being, what life do I want to live? A life ruled by desire, or a life ruled by meaning? A life of endless craving, or a life of quiet joy? A life spent running, or a life spent arriving? Because that choice is yours. In every moment you can choose to escape, or you can choose to evolve. And when you choose evolution again and again, you begin to change, not just your habits. You change your destiny. You begin to walk the narrow path that few take. The path of integrity, discipline, and power. And in doing so, you do not become less human. You become fully alive. So let this be the beginning of your awakening. Let this message echo in your soul long after the video ends. Let this not be something you simply watched. Let it be something you lived. Because the one who transforms lust does not become empty. He becomes free. And in that freedom, he transforms his perception of the world. If this message stirred something within you, share your reflections in the comments. What part of this journey spoke most deeply to your heart? What habits are you ready to let go of? What truth are you ready to embody? Let's walk this path together. Your revolution begins now. Thanks for pausing here.